So just looking at some of the turnout and the opening of the boxes and I suppose, the initial countings, it looks like, I suppose you have to laugh, right? But it looks like more of the same to a degree, right? Minus a few little surprises. There might be a couple of horrors that lose their seats, which is perfectly welcome. But sometimes the replacement can be worse than the old boss, right? But I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago about people's perception of time, right? Whether they're aware of it or not, and where, I suppose, their heart or where their sentiment, the sentimentality in them, where that dwells, right? Which tense of time does that dwell, right? And what we seem to be caught in is 3 different realms, right? So we have, and there was a woman, bless her soul, on RTE, it was a few seconds. I don't want to share the video because I don't want to be looking like I'm kind of trying to draw attention to, or draw negative attention this woman's way, because I'm not, right? But it was an old lady, and she was saying simply, I voted Fianna Fáil because my family vote Fianna Fáil, and my family have always voted Fianna Fáil, and therefore I'll continue to vote for Fianna Fáil, right? And that woman is indicative of a good percentage of Irish people, right? And you can see it in the age breakdowns, right, where the old masters still wield a bit of authority, right, or still have a big enough influence to feel safe and to be safe, right? And I think that's kind of what you're seeing, right? But these people that I'm speaking of in terms of this woman, right, they dwell in a time that is no longer here, right? At least in reality. And their sentiment lies in a perspective, a way of establishing and announcing yourself as Irish and being part of what is good for Irish people by going along with the parties of the time, right? That espouse the same sort of stuff, right? That we look after you, we'll care for you, and we love you, and we'll make Ireland lovely and all that stuff. We'll keep it lovely, right? So they're still voting with their hearts, and their hearts are dwelling in a time that is not based in reality, right? Because the parties that their family would have voted for are nearly 100% diametrically opposed to what the same parties act on, and what the consequences of the parties as they stand today, right? So there's a sadness in that, right? Because in order for clarity to arrive, we might have to see these people go, right? Or we might have to wait until these people go. Because it's easier to spend your last few years doing the same thing you've always done, rather than to reflect on the fact that you've probably been sold a lie and bought a lie for 20, 30 years, or even longer, right? So it might be a case of waiting for them, which is a horrible way of looking at it. It's not something you'd even want to be considering, but it is reality to a degree, and the proof is in the pudding, right? So the other hindrance that we have in terms of time perspective, is those who are blinded by a utopian vision, nicely packaged and sold to them through all the universities and colleges, right? And to a large degree, the most prevalent media, right, in the country and in these people's lives, right, internationally as well, right? And that is the idea of vote left, transfer left, and utopia, right? And I believe that the right wing, left wing thing is a bit of a red herring as well, right? Because there's elements of Irish history and culture and tradition that you would look at and say, that's left wing, right? And then there's also elements that you'd look at and say, that's right wing. Reality is made up of both elements, right? Whatever way you want to phrase it or term it, right? The left wing, right wing thing, it's handy as I suppose, a heuristic, a way of explaining things to people. But to continue to battle along those lines, I think, is kind of faulty, right? The battle should be on ideas and results. Like, in my perspective, like, these three leaders that were in this debate, I don't even want you talking about what you'll do in the future. I don't need that from you. I need to pull apart all of your voting histories and pull apart the consequences of the things that you stood over. That's all I'd be interested in talking to them people about, right? I don't care what you say about the future when you've made a mess of the past, like, and you're lying about it in the present, right? But be that as it may, you have the people that are half buried alive in the past, right? And they're still looking at the present through the lens of the past, when it's no longer, there's no real issue with that in principle, right? But it's not indicative of what the past was. So I would argue, they're making flawed decisions based on sentiment as opposed to anything really. And it speaks to, as well, like, not to just pour scorn on people, because you take the good out of this thing. So what is the virtue that is being used against people, right? What are people acting from? Because people like to act out of the goodness in themselves, or at least be seen to be acting out of the goodness of themselves. So I would give the benefit of the doubt to a large degree, and I would try and extract the virtue that people are operating from. And I think it is a traditionalism in people, right? The Irish especially have, our roots are so deep into our traditions that they have to be stolen from us. We have to be murdered, killed, set on fire, and shamed relentlessly to give up the smallest of things, right? So people still of that ilk, I applaud and I respect their integrity in terms of doing what they believe is the way it should be done, according to the tradition and the custom and the culture and the community that they have, right? I respect that. That's something you wouldn't want to get rid of, right? But that can be used against you, right? That can be used against you. And the total devotion that Irish people would have once had to philosophical principles, to the idea of individual freedom, right? Choice, right? Adam wasn't born with an original sin, with an original taint. This was the Irish perspective on Christianity. We don't need original sin. Man is not contaminated just by the fact that he's being born. Beautiful stuff, lovely stuff, right? We would have had a devotion to that in each of us, right? The heroic inside. And then that got swooned over to an inversion of that, which is take all that devotion and blow it out the way, right? Project it to something external of yourselves and bow down to that, right? And we had that for millennia, right? And on and on and on. And people adhered to that, right? And that devotion somehow got intermingled between Catholicism and political parties. Two birds of the same eagle, right? Or two wings of the same eagle. And as the decline in the church began, the devotion just lay in these political parties. That's the past, right? That's the past, and that's a particular age group whose lives have been lived now, right? And they're going to do it to continue what they've always done, right? And then the counter side to that is the future of these blind avoiders of reality, I would say, right? Who are allured by the idea of utopia, where everything is free and you don't have to work for anything, and the state will just endlessly provide for you, right? It's a scared infant sort of a syndrome, right? Where the child wants to make sure that feeding time is always at the same thing and it's always coming from mammy, and mammy always has the milk, and milk, lovely, 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 right? That's the kind of childlike mentality, because it doesn't matter to a lot of these people how you get there. You just need to look like you're constantly pushing through and smashing down barriers to get to this heaven on earth, right? This utopia, which doesn't exist, right? Unless you want to walk over endless carcasses and endless bodies. And even at that, it doesn't work, right? It doesn't work. You can't continuously steal from the present to fund a future that will never manifest itself, right? And that leaves us with the present as well. So you have people who are looking at the reality of a situation as best they can. Mistakes be made, but perceptions are flawed, as they always kind of are. But there's a bit of an aggregate, right, that you can take from that. Some things are just undeniably prevalent in a society that you can see and you take in with your own senses. So you have the dwellers in the present that are looking at things going, lads, come on now. Never mind the future for a second, right? And the past is gone. Can we forget about that now? Because it's not what you think you're doing. Can we have a look at the serious situation that we are in at the moment? And both sides, past and future-oriented peoples or minds, they don't have an interest in that, right? Because it's not pleasant. It's not pleasant. And man will do anything to, regardless of how absurd, to avoid staring at his own soul, right? Or meeting his own soul, right? And people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid from engaging with reality, especially if it's an inconvenience to them or if it's scary, right? So that's where we're at, and my God, you kind of have to laugh, but that's where we are with Irish people. So there's generational differences. Generational differences dyed in the wool, and there's no talking to people, and a lot of people, right? And you have some stupid people that are silly people that they will only allow their daughter to go out with a man who votes for this party. Nonsense like that, right? You have that. There's people like that in Ireland, right? There is people like that all across Ireland, right? That are total ignorant devotion to a group of men and women, regardless of who's in there, as long as they wear the flag with certain name on it, right? You have people like that, and they tend to be in the older generation. So you are seeing a change. We are going through a change, right? And I think what we're in the process of doing psychologically is catching up with the 20th century, right? We're beginning to process that, right? We might even be moving into a phase now where we're beginning to remember or deal with the mindsets that went along with the Troubles and the Sinn Féin stuff and all of that sort of stuff, right? And I think we might have to see a Sinn Féin-led government in order to process that, so we can digest that and go, Jesus, you know what? For all the ooh ah up to whatever stuff they were singing, these people they don't mean what they say. You know, we might have to go through that. Like it looks like we're coming out the other side of the Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael stuff. It looks like we're going to have to go through and weather the storm that Sinn Féin bring, or some other left-wing, some other parties that have no interest in your individual liberty and your individual freedom, right? It's as simple as that. You can divide it that way. People that care about individual personality, responsibility, and freedom, and those who just see individuals as a tool. That's your difference, fundamentally, right? So these are the waters that we're in, right? And I suppose to a large degree we're in no different situation today as we were yesterday, regardless of which way this ends, right? It's the same thing. We all have to fight our own individual battles. We all have to try and wade through reality in the present moment as best as we can, while trying to take in some of the present or some of the past and some of our history to try and make sense of what is going on in the present, to try and get some sort of gauge on what's going to happen in the future, and to see if we can influence that in some way, while also retaining relationships probably with people that we are a little bit disagreeable with, extended families, all that sort of stuff, right? Difficult times, while also trying to work and make enough money to pay for all of the stuff that all of these parties who made empty promises to you have saddled you with. Like you see in America now, that Vivek, can't pronounce the second name, but Vivek, he's in Trump's clean up the government, get rid of bureaucracy center or whatever, right? The organization, whatever, with Elon. And he's like, this is how far off we are from common sense in this country, right? So this fella is talking about Trump introducing the idea and pushing through the idea of just getting rid of income tax, right? Just getting rid of it. There's no reason why the money you make privately, personally, should be taken by other people to give to other people. And you've no say in where that goes and how much they take off you, right? And in Ireland, we're still voting like it's 100 years ago, right? Our allegiance is to a bygone era in a lot of cases. And on the flip side of that, then, you've people whose allegiance does not take the past into consideration at all. They've no interest in the history of socialist parties or communist parties. They have no interest in it. They'll deny it outright, and they'll cling to the idea that, well, when it's done properly, it'll be great, and we just have to maraud through the guts and the blood to get there, and then it'll be great, I swear, right? It'll be great. That's where we are. And then you have a small amount of people that, small amount in terms of the context of the whole country, right, that are looking at this going, this is nuts, lads. This is nuts. I can't do another 5 years of this. I'm not doing another 5 years of this. Right? So what are your options? And that's for another day, like, but this is where we are at the moment, and we'll see what happens by the end of the day. Have a good one.